Cause I seen when we didn't have running water and I lived at, when we didn't have no paved street, no sidewalk, none of that stuff.
Okay.
So, my aunt, she was a secretary, she's not here, for the JIA for over 40 years.
Okay.
So we have all her minutes.
And the JIA, what's that?
Josephine Improvement.
Okay, gotcha.
So that was established in '65.
Okay.
So they got a lot of work done.
Mm-hmm.
But our generation dropped the ball. So,
Well, you moved away, a lot of them.
yeah, most of them moved away.
That's-
Because when I was growing up, it was 89 kids here
Okay.
on the street. And it was all black street.
Okay.
And the first white person moved on the street was 1987.
Okay.
That was the Salvage, not the Salvage, Jake. Yeah, he was the first white person across the street from us in '87. So it was 89 kids. There was no jobs here, so they moved on down to the city. And so it's still connections with a whole bunch of family members, but they just don't live here.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
But they come home on holidays. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what's so? I think I was talking to was it Christy or
Christy Dunkel.
Yeah,
She's the planner.
the
For the
plan. Yeah.
town.
So I know you mentioned jobs. You know, well, I'm really big on workforce development, job creation. What has been the pushback on that? Like, I know obviously there has to be an emphasis on a certain market, but is there something that has tried and failed, or are you guys open?
Oh, God. Well, it's a long story.
Yeah,
You know, when we first talked and you talked about development,
yeah,
and I said that's sort of a dirty word around here.
right.
And because the county, so I think if you look back at the history of the county
Mm-hmm.
and understand that this area was sort of off limits, what's now Clark County was off limits to your average settler
Mm-hmm.
during the 18th century, because all the land basically from the Chesapeake Bay up to West Virginia, this is northern Virginia up into West Virginia, was owned by Thomas Lord Fairfax, who was British.
Okay.
So while the state government was trying to settle people, moving westward,
Yeah.
this was off limits because it was Lord Fairfax's, and then his land agent, who was Robert Carter from down around Williamsburg. He decided as payment for his services, partial payment for his services, he would keep 50,000 acres for himself, for his children, for his grandchildren. So, and that's a large part, probably half of Clark County. South of here, coming up into, not including Berryville, but what happened is in the 1790s, the people that lived in Tidewater, Virginia, the land down there was getting, not as productive as it used to be because of all the tobacco being grown. So they decided, heck, we're going to move up to the Shenandoah Valley where we've got this fertile land we inherited. It's free.
Mm-hmm.
They'd already had their slaves up here.
Mm-hmm.
They had tenants working, the land. So they moved up here with all these, there were these, if you drive through the county, you see these huge estates.
Yeah.
You're like, what is going on? Because then when you go to Winchester, and we were part of Frederick County, which is where Winchester is, all of Frederick County, Warren County, all these areas, they have sort of more modest land holdings, more modest dwellings, because those were settled by Scots-Irish and the Germans who came down, from Pennsylvania. Like, that's the traditional way the Shenandoah Valley was settled.
Gotcha.
But like I said, this area was kind of off limits. So you have this long tradition of a slaveholding society, and I think I told you on the phone that before the Civil War, there were more African Americans in Clark County, in the area that became Clark County, because Clark County broke off in 1836 from Frederick County. Because the people they thought they were being unfairly taxed, because remember, you were taxed on the slaves that you had. So they were paying way more tax than anyone else in the rest of Frederick County, because they had hundreds of slaves, or, scores of slaves. So anyway, what that did then, after the Civil War and the emancipation of African Americans, there was this amazing thing that happened in Clark County. There was this creation of these communities, and there were about 10 of them throughout the county that were created by African Americans who purchased land and built these little communities. And I'm going to get you this report I did back in 2003, where I looked at all of them there, because I was like, what are these little towns? They're called Louisville, Browntown, Gaylord, and I knew the story about Josephine.
Yeah.
But I started looking, and people had told me, oh yeah, these were developed by blacks who'd been given the land. Well, I looked at the deeds. It's the same thing when I worked on this school. I'd always been told that the land had been given by Ellen McCormick, who owned property just to the east. Well, when you look in the deeds, it's like, no, they paid for it. How could that really important detail be lost? And it was lost also among, the blacks that told me that it was given to them.
What they've been told.
It's what they've been told. I guess, when you're told for so long that you're not worth anything, you're not counted as a human, and then, and you're afraid, I'm sure.
Of course.
Anyway, so there were these communities, and they built, schools. Usually they were anchored by a school and a church. And so Clark County has these, and I've been just very, invested emotionally and intellectually in trying to get this story out there. And, trying to do it because, I'm a historian, so I'm not necessarily an activist. But I try to educate people about the truth. And with the hope that the truth will make them see things in a different way, treat people in a different way. And so what happened after the Civil War is you did have this, migration of African Americans out to places, to the city, if you will, for jobs. And, if you look at census records and whatever, right after the Civil War, if you look, in the 1870 census, most of the jobs for African Americans were either farm laborers or housekeepers, or, these were not jobs that people wanted to do forever. So the younger generation, when they were able to get an education here, got their high school education, and then, all of a sudden the possibility of going to college or going somewhere else opened up to them, so they left. This has happened all over. And you cannot fault them for that.
Absolutely not.
And so they're gone. What happens at sort of the same time is after the Civil War, you have these wealthy Northerners coming in and buying these big estates. Because land was cheap, they had money. People here had lost stuff during the Civil War. And a lot of these African American communities that developed were sold off, big farms, because, after the Civil War, your biggest investment was your slaves. They were your property, and all of a sudden you didn't have that anymore. So, they would mortgage their against their slaves and do all sorts of things, rent them out and whatever. So all of a sudden they didn't have the money that they had before. So this was an opportunity for these wealthy Northerners to come in, and there was a huge and this is in Loudoun County, huge movement with fox hunting that came down. And, Loudoun County, I'm sure when you were in Middleburg, you saw the red fox and all that stuff. There's this long tradition of fox hunting.
Okay.
And this, what happened in the early 20th century, you had these people come up, like the Orange County hunt, which, if you fox hunt, which I don't know.
It's sad. It's
Orange County, there's an Orange County, Virginia, and people think it's Orange County, Virginia. Well, it's not. It's the Orange County, New York that came down and established their hunt. That's why at the Salamander there's Harriman's.
Okay.
That's the name of her restaurant, because Mr. Harriman came down, and he was, I don't know, what's the Harriman family fortune based on? But these were wealthy Northerners who came in, and they started settling in, Oh, we got these big houses here, these big estates. Because who can afford to keep an estate like that going? So, you have this influx of wealthy people coming into Clark County who have the ability financially to preserve these large swaths of land. And so there has been, since probably the early 80s, a movement in Clark County to kind of preserve as much of the open space. And so there are all these financial incentives, once again.
Yeah.
But you have to have the land
To do it. Yeah.
to get into it, but you put your land in easement. You give up the development rights. So about 45% of the county is in easement, which is great because we're assured these beautiful scenic vistas that you see are going to be preserved in perpetuity.
Yeah.
But that's also a thing with development. So they're very careful about development. It's and that was done purposefully. And they don't that's why you see the growth around existing communities. And also they're very aware of the fact that natural resources are not, it's not an infinite source.
For sure.
We understand that, you can't be drilling and putting in wells all the time and have your neighbor do the same thing and have this septic system on your well. And, they're very aware. And the geology here is this karst, so there are a lot of caves and caverns underneath. So they're all very careful about this is the county, very careful about what kind of developments they allow.
Okay.
So that's a really long answer to your question, but like I said, you need to understand sort of the context of why the Clark County is the way it is. Did I capture that?
No, you did, but you left out, because you were being nice, the emotional part, that this area is also extremely conservative politically. So they don't really want newcomers, especially, I would say, immigrants. So this is another way, they can't afford land, so we'll keep the prices up.
Yeah.
We won't have that problem.
Won't have that problem. Gotcha.
Yeah. That's, yes.
And that's why there's also so little generational wealth among black people, because to just pay taxes on a few acres is outrageous.
Yeah.
And then if your mom and dad didn't let you inherit, you don't have anything.
Right.
So it's a
You
very,
can't purchase it because it's cost prohibitive.
and now, really, and of course it goes up each year. So it's part of development. I love your idea about even something educational. How to have local blacks get into buying whatever land we can afford and start farming, again with new methods, all the technology, and start building up some generational wealth, because we knew we lost that. We lost it, and we're never really allowed to have fair game to get this land. I don't know if you guys all know about, like the USDA, Department of Agriculture, has, settled that we realize in the past we have done bad to minority farmers. Here's the money, 50-something million. Well, of course, some white farmers went and got some injunctions. It's not fair. So I said, give them DNA tests. If they want to find out they're black, The USDA has done their research. They said they did the wrong thing.
Well, and how long have white people been getting farm subsidies?
Price support, etc. So here is this
Wow.
small issue in this one little community that really is a microcosm of all the crap that's been done. And that's why at any point, anybody that comes forward and says, well, listen, I want to read a book to somebody, great. We need everything.
No, 100%.
Yeah,
Everything.
100%.
and it is a very conservative thing, and now they've just done redistricting,
Okay.
and we had, so now we're even gonna,
Yeah, DC.
we're stuck with sort of the rest of the valley, which is all, very conservative and, so that I hadn't even considered that thing, but we had talked about, specifically what's going on with Josephine Street.
Yeah.
And how do you solve this problem
Yes.
of, trying to preserve these houses that are very significant historically?
Yeah.
And, emotionally, they're very significant to
Yeah.
these people because it is a symbol of what
One
they
of
succeeded in doing
They weren't
very
supposed to
shortly
do.
after the Civil War,
Right.
And nobody seems to get how, or the people who are in charge don't seem to understand how important that is. And so we've got private properties, that are, you saw these houses are in derelict condition.
Yeah.
The people who own them don't live here.
Okay.
For the most part, correct, Dee Dee? For the
Yeah.
most part, they don't live here, but they have roots here, and they come back here, they're homecomings and all sorts of things. So how can you help them, and then, once you get them fixed up, you get them fixed up to what end? Are they gonna move back here? Probably not.
Right.
Do they wanna rent them out? Okay, getting them to the point probably where you can rent them out and, put plumbing and kitchens and bathrooms, what people want. They don't wanna live in a 3-room house anymore.
No.
They want some
Yeah.
palatial thing. So I think it's a really hard nut to crack to figure out how, and I'm trying to look at it practically, like, could parts of the buildings be saved maybe?
Right. Yeah.
So that, and maybe stop looking at it as trying to bring them up to way modern standards, Could we mothball them? That's the term they use in preservation here, until something can be decided. Some people have suggested moving them. I'm not really keen on that because that takes the context away.
Right.
But I think, I don't know if I told you, there are some grants available, like there's a civil rights grant. The National Park Service has lots of grant money
Okay.
that comes from offshore drilling rights that they sell off each year. And that funds a lot of things. And we have, for the 3rd year in a row now, maybe we'll get it this time, Dee Dee, applied for a grant to help with the Zion Annex, which is that building that when you come in, it was the first church in town. It's on the right, and it's now owned. The church that replaced it is across the street, and this is, where they have their, Sunday school and meetings after, they'd have dinners there. It's where they meet.
Yeah.
And it's got an addition on it, which is in pretty good shape, but the old part is not in good shape. And so we've been trying, this is the county,
Yeah.
agreed to be the fiscal agent. And I've helped in the application, trying to get this money, and we'll see what happens. And so, that's sort of the only, and you can do civil rights grants to do lots of buildings, but it's complicated. You got to get everyone the bureaucracy.
Yeah. No.
It's just sort of people. So
But they don't do individual properties, right?
they will do individual properties, but they have to be tied into civil rights.
Okay.
So the argument was, because we got a civil right, the county owns this building technically. We applied for a civil rights grant to put a new roof here. And I made the argument in the application that, this is critical. This is where the people in the community learn to read and write. And,
Absolutely.
If you didn't have that, you're not gonna have civil rights. And I think they gave us the money because it was such a small amount, considering what we asked for, because, you know, they give money to, you know, really significant places with the civil rights. But what they have now done is they have seen the light and said, you know, we're not gonna limit it to just the civil rights era. Because yes, the earlier history, you know, slavery and emancipation, it has to do with the whole civil rights movement. So now they have opened it up, so it's a little easier to get. So, but I think it'd be, if there was some sort of concerted like effort, a project, a plan that would address the questions of like, okay, who's gonna live there? Or what's its final use gonna be? Who's gonna, you know, who actually owns them? We have a lot of these with clouded titles.
Gotcha.
And so, you know, that's sort of an issue. And so there are a lot of
Possibilities.
there are a huge amount of possibilities, and then there are all these other little things, that make it a real challenge.
Gotcha.
That make it a real challenge. But I mean, it's so frustrating to see, you know, someplace like this, which it's such an amazing story, you know.
100%.
And the whole fact, you know, it was named after a woman. You don't have lots of communities named after women.
Yeah,
And
that's what
it's like,
intrigued
who
me.
is this Josephine? We've been trying to figure out. We think we have ideas, but you know, it's just it's such a really neat story, and it's, you know, I think if white people put themselves in the position of blacks at the time and imagined what it must have taken, the courage to do this. Well, I mean, you can't imagine it, but I, you know, want people to appreciate it, because it was not an easy task. And it's not that they just did it here. They did it in other places in the county.
Which is very interesting to me, because going into it, I did not know that it was other
Yeah, I gotta get you a copy of that report.
So you talked a little bit about Miss Williams. Who is she? Like,
Well, I talked about her in the nomination. So we basically, she purchased, you know, there's that plat of, and I brought you a copy of my book, because you need to have a thing about Clark County. No, I'm just going to give this to you.
You never gave me one.
Wait a minute. I've given you lots of things.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so I did a chapter on African Americans. Because it's important. Okay, so here are the communities, and you know, I was limited to word count for these things, but so and you know, this is going to explain everything about everything I've said, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good start. It doesn't, you know, not that it doesn't, but there's so much more. For instance, Dr. Jonathan Noyales is now writing some wonderful books about research done about the African Americans in the Valley. I learned lots of things. One of the things he pointed out was that after emancipation, the majority of these white people wanted black folks out of here.
Yeah.
Out, get out. We don't care if you, and they had nothing. We don't care, leave. I'm not going to employ you, I'm not going to do this. So it was hard for them to survive. Secondly, then they had to mentally make choices such as, oh, Massa had sold my wife to somebody so many years ago. I'm not going anywhere until I find her, which was more or less probably further south. So they had to make the decision, is it better to stay here with the devil I know, or try to go somewhere else and start a whole new life? So, I mean, it's very emotional.
100%.
And it doesn't go away, it doesn't let you go. Really.
Yeah, but see, they always wanted this to be industrial too. Because when I was a young kid, my mother said people was coming around trying to buy the property for like $500. But nobody, $500 when we was young kids. Back in those days, $500 was a lot of money to them. But they didn't sell, you know. So it's, you know.
Well, that makes sense. They surrounded you with the apple processing
orchard.
thing.
Yeah.
there,
Industrial
and then the
park.
county puts this industrial
Industrial
park
park.
right in their
And
backyard.
then they get ready to put 3 buildings across from the cemetery.
Yeah, I saw a check there.
Yeah, glass buildings and stuff, so
Anyway.
I asked Christy down where they gonna buffer them with trees. You know, on
'cause
both
that
sides.
needs to be
So,
some
you know, when we have,
privacy
yeah, when we
trees
have.
and
Thank
stuff.
you.
Yeah.
She said, oh, well, I don't think so. So I seen the ladies who's over top of the project, so I called her myself.
Yeah.
So she said, huh?
Good for
How
you.
you do? Yeah, yeah.
So when she was at the meeting, I talked to her.
Yeah,
And so she said they putting that on their,
master
Yeah.
plan,
yeah.
they'll put some
so-
planting. Yeah,
So-
it's sort of these like little slap in the face here and there, you
Yeah,
know,
I
but
see.
it's like,
Environmental
Enough
included,
already.
right. They're not even looking at the environmental impact
Yeah.
of what's gonna happen on the community. And then they had the situation where the trucks were coming up and down the
oh,
street here.
yeah, and I'm,
Oh my gosh.
calling over there to the factory every day. But they kind of slowed down now, kind of slowed down. Well, I would go out there and tell them, you're not supposed to be down here, and I can't make you back all the way up, or you're gonna have to pay me $500.
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Get
right,
something.
back there, we use this factory here, so,
Gotcha.
you know, and remember, this wasn't part of the town of Berryville until 1986, it was.
89,
89, sorry.
Gotcha.
after everything
It
was
was,
Yeah.
so, you
Done.
know, it was part of
Yes.
the county, so it was kind of, you know, out of town. And,
So we trying to get back in the county and get out of the town.
Gotcha. Is it an opportunity, or do you think that you can, the people on Josephine Street can reclaim these buildings as ownership, or is
They own these
They
buildings.
own them, they own them.
Okay.
And I'm
These people
sorry,
own
but I
these
have to
buildings.
leave.
Okay, no,
I'm
it's,
really
I will be back. I will.
Okay,
I will
good, I
be
hope
bringing.
so. And
Yes,
if you
it was
email me your mailing address, I can get the county to mail you a copy of that. There was
Okay.
an African-American, or I can mail it to you, African-American historic context
Okay.
that goes in much more detail about each of these communities, as well as there's a context about, that describes sort of what happened to, you know, the blacks, what happened during the Civil War, what happened before. Because it's a really unique story.
Yes, and it needs
So,
to be.
okay, you need to be told it. I'm
Thank you
sorry
for-
to
Yeah, thank you so much.
Nice
It's
meeting
very
you.
good to
Bye.
Till next time.
meet you
Okay.
also.
Thanks, Ralph. You're a good day.
Enjoy your day.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, ladies.
So that's the old sign that we have underneath the table.
Oh.
That's the old sign that they have wrote.
Heavy.
So we had to fight
But.
with this sign. Then they took it, we got a new sign up there now.
We're gonna leave it there though. We're gonna leave it.
Yeah, just move the table.
Oh.
That easy.
Hold on. I'm gonna have to pick it up. It's kind of it's blocking.
Oh, that's okay. Well, basically, it's just
Here we go.
the whole idea that white women donated. The whole idea of this sign saying that someone,
All right, I wrote that.
well, she, bless her heart, she's
Yeah, she's correcting her
coming
mistakes
up.
now.
I'm telling you.
She's correcting it.
So,
Yeah, because when we got this back, because they was gonna crush it up.
What's up, bro?
So Wolf,
How you good?
old man Wolf, yeah, he made sure we got it back.
gotcha.
So then we got the new sign,
Very good.
I think like 2015.
This is the original one.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
The idea of black folks having no agency in their lives was just
Crazy.
a pandemic.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, they had children who had children, and he's still walking around thinking that same stupidity, that black people can't, well, that was one of their arguments about slavery in the first place. Oh, they need us to educate them, they need us to take care of them. So we've got to stop these history books or whatever conversations that are being had that even gets introduced into kids' heads. We had a school group come in, and a little white girl answered this question for me. The question was, how do you think that these people who had been slaves and worked all day, usually had to grow their own food, but yet could hire themselves out to make extra money, after the war, where do you think they got money from? Well, the girl said they probably stole it. See, that's the kind of crap that, damn,
Yeah.
where did you get such a